She arranged flowers like she once arranged missions, with precision, with purpose, with a calmness that came from knowing exactly what needed to happen next. Nobody in the small mountain town of Cedar Falls, Colorado, knew that the quiet woman who ran Petals and Peace flower shop had once been the most feared sniper in Delta Force. They saw Sarah Mitchell as the gentle florist who always smiled, always listened, always knew exactly which flowers would brighten someone's day. They had no idea she could extinguish a candle flame from over a mile and a half away, till the night everything changed. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we begin this incredible story of an underestimated woman who made the impossible shot that saved her reputation and shocked an entire military unit, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. These are the heroes hiding in plain sight. Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, had been running her flower shop in Cedar Falls for 3 years. Every morning at 7 a.m., she'd unlock the green-painted door, flip the sign from closed to open, and begin her ritual of arranging the day's displays. Roses from local gardens, lilies shipped from Denver. Baby's breath that reminded her of morning fog over mountain peaks she'd once observed through a different kind of scope. Cedar Falls was a town of 8,000 people, nestled in the Colorado Rockies about an hour from Fort Carson. Military personnel often drove through, some stopping for gas, others for a meal at Murphy's Diner, a few ending up at the Ranger's Rest, the local bar that stayed open until 2 a.m. and served the strongest drinks in 3 counties. Sarah knew the town's rhythms. She knew Mrs. Henderson would come in every Tuesday for yellow tulips for her late husband's grave. She knew Tom Rodriguez would order a dozen red roses every Friday before driving to Denver to see his girlfriend. She knew the high school kids would pool their money for corsages in April and May. What none of them knew was that Sarah could calculate wind speed by watching the way flower petals moved in her shop window. They didn't know she chose her apartment specifically because it had clear sightlines to every entrance of the town. They didn't know that when she arranged flowers, her hands moved with the same steady precision that had once made her the most effective long-range eliminator in the most elite military unit in the world. Sarah Mitchell had been Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, Delta Force, call sign Whisper, for 8 years. She'd completed 127 confirmed eliminations across 4 countries. She'd saved countless lives by taking others. She'd operated in places that didn't exist on maps, completing missions that would never appear in any official record. And now she arranged flowers. The transition hadn't been easy. After her final mission in Syria, the one that ended with 3 of her team members dead and Sarah carrying shrapnel in her left shoulder that still ached when storms were coming, she'd been medically retired with full honors, a chest full of medals she kept in a shoebox, and PTSD that woke her up at 3 a.m. most nights. The Army had offered counseling, transition programs, job placement assistance. But Sarah had wanted something different, something quiet, something that created beauty instead of destruction. So she'd taken her savings, bought a one-way ticket to Colorado, and found the smallest town that felt safe. Cedar Falls had felt right immediately. Mountain walls on 3 sides, one main road in and out, clear sight lines, defensible positions, perfect for someone who needed to see threats coming. But after 3 years, the only threats in Cedar Falls were customers who couldn't decide between daisies and carnations. That Tuesday evening, everything changed. The Ranger's Rest was packed for a Tuesday night. A group of 8 soldiers from Fort Carson had driven up for what their sergeant called team building, but what everyone else recognized as an excuse to drink beer and play pool without officers watching. Sarah had been walking home from her shop when she heard the laughter spilling out onto Main Street. She normally avoided the bar. Too many uniforms, too many memories, too many questions she didn't want to answer. But it was 9 p.m. She was tired, and the quickest route to her apartment went right past the front door. She was almost clear when she heard her name. "Hey, flower lady!" Sarah stopped, turned. A young soldier, maybe 22, with sergeant stripes and the kind of confidence that came from never having it tested, was standing in the doorway. "You're Sarah, right? From the flower shop?" "That's right." Her voice was calm, neutral, the voice she'd used during debriefings. "Come settle an argument for us." This was exactly what Sarah wanted to avoid. But the kid was persistent, and backing down would create more attention than just dealing with whatever nonsense was brewing inside. She followed him into the bar. The group of soldiers had claimed the back corner, pool table and all. Beer bottles covered the table. Someone had been losing at darts. The conversation stopped when Sarah walked over. "Guys, this is Sarah," the sergeant announced. "She runs the flower shop." A chorus of polite hellos. Sarah nodded, scanned the group. All young, all infantry from their patches, all carrying themselves with the particular swagger of soldiers who'd completed basic training but hadn't yet learned what real combat could do to a person. "What's the argument?" Sarah asked. A corporal with red hair and freckles spoke up. "Jackson here thinks women can't handle weapons, says they don't have the strength or the focus." Sarah looked at Jackson. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who probably played football in high school and joined the army when college didn't work out. "That's not exactly what I said," Jackson protested. "I said most women. Like, they're better at other things, like—" He gestured vaguely at Sarah, "like arranging flowers. That takes patience and skill. But combat, shooting, that's different." "Different how?" Sarah's voice was still neutral, but something in her tone made the room quieter. "Physical. Mental. It's about handling pressure, making split-second decisions with lives on the line. Most people can't do it. Most women can't do it." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "You think I couldn't handle a weapon?" Jackson looked uncomfortable. "I mean, no offense, but look at you. You're what, 5'5"? Maybe 130 pounds? You arrange flowers for a living? I'm not saying that's bad, but it's not exactly combat training." The other soldiers were watching this exchange with the fascination of people who sensed something interesting was about to happen, but couldn't quite figure out what. "What would it take to prove wrong?" Sarah asked. Jackson laughed. "I don't know. Can you even hold a rifle?" "Let's find out." The room went completely silent. "What do you mean?" Jackson asked. Sarah looked around the group. "You want to make this interesting? Put some money on it." "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Jackson glanced at his buddies, then back at Sarah. "Okay. What kind of bet are we talking about?" "You pick the challenge. You pick the distance. You pick the target. If I can't make the shot, I'll pay every one of you $100. Sarah paused. "But if I make it, you each pay me $100. 8 soldiers, $800 total." "Hold up," said the red-haired corporal. "That's not fair. 8 against 1. "You're right," Sarah said. "Let's make it even. If I miss, I pay everyone $100. If I hit, Jackson pays me $1,000. The room erupted. $1,000? Are you insane? "Jackson, don't do it." But Jackson was looking at Sarah with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "Lady, I don't want to take your money." "You won't be taking it. You'll be earning it. If you're right about women and weapons." Jackson's buddies were all talking at once, but Sarah could see the exact moment when his pride overruled his common sense. "Fine," he said. "But I pick everything. Distance, target, conditions." "Agreed. And we do it tonight." "Agreed." Jackson smiled. "There's a shooting range about 15 miles north of town. Private place, owned by a guy named Murphy. He lets us use it sometimes for practice." Sarah knew Murphy's range. She'd scouted it during her first week in town, along with every other tactical position within a 50-mile radius. It was a good range. Very good. Professional grade, with lanes that extended out to 1,500 meters. "What's the target?" Sarah asked. Jackson thought for a moment. "Standard silhouette at—" He paused, clearly trying to pick something difficult enough to ensure Sarah would fail. "At 800 meters. Murmurs around the table. 800 meters was a long shot, even for trained military shooters. For a civilian florist, it should be impossible." "Too easy," Sarah said. The room went quiet again. "What?" "I said too easy. If we're betting $1,000, it should be challenging." Jackson stared at her. "Lady, 800 meters is—" "Let me suggest something," Sarah interrupted. "Murphy's range goes out to 1,500 meters, right?" "Yeah, but—" "And he's got that little building at the far end? The one with the observation deck?" Jackson nodded slowly. "There's a flagpole on that deck, about 20 feet tall." "So?" Sarah smiled. "So tonight's a clear night. No wind. Good visibility." She paused. "Murphy keeps an emergency candle in that building. Big white candle, about the width of your thumb." The soldiers were listening intently now. "Here's my proposal," Sarah continued. "We set up the candle on the observation deck, light it. I take one shot from the 500-meter line to put it out." Complete silence. "You want to shoot out a candle flame from almost a mile away?" Jackson's voice was higher than it had been a moment before. "Actually, 1,500 meters is about 0.93 miles. Not quite a mile. That's impossible. For most people, yes. Jackson looked around at his buddies, all of whom were staring at Sarah. She just claimed she could fly. Nobody can make that shot, he said finally. Then you'll win $1,000. The silence stretched for almost a minute. Finally, Jackson spoke. You're serious. Dead serious. And if you somehow make this impossible shot, I pay you $1,000. That's the deal. Jackson stuck out his hand. You're on. Sarah shook it. Let's go. 20 minutes later, a convoy of 3 vehicles was winding through the mountain roads toward Murphy's Range. Sarah rode in her own truck, following the soldiers who were all packed into 2 Army surplus jeeps. As she drove, Sarah allowed herself to think about what she was really doing. The shot she'd proposed was difficult, but not impossible. She'd made similar shots in combat, under much worse conditions: wind, rain, hostile fire, moving targets. A stationary candle on a clear night was actually easier than most of the shots she'd taken in Syria. But that wasn't the point. The point was that these young soldiers, good soldiers, probably, but untested, thought they knew what a warrior looked like. They thought strength came from size, from gender, from the ability to bench press your body weight or run a 6-minute mile. They had no idea that the most dangerous person in their unit might be the quiet one in the corner, the one who never raised their voice, never bragged, never drew attention. They had no idea that warriors came in all shapes and sizes. They were about to learn. Murphy's Range sat in a natural valley between 2 ridgelines, hidden from the main road by a 1/4 mile of dirt track. It was a serious facility, the kind of place where law enforcement and military units came for advanced training. Multiple lanes extending from 100 meters out to 500 meters, electronic targeting systems, climate-controlled shooting positions. Murphy himself was waiting when they arrived. Big guy, early 60s, wearing a Colorado Rockies cap and a flannel shirt. He'd been expecting them. Jackson had called ahead. Sarah Mitchell, he said, walking over to shake her hand. Heard you're planning some kind of demonstration. Something like that. Murphy studied her face in the headlights. I've been running this range for 23 years, trained military, law enforcement, competitive shooters. That shot you're talking about, he shook his head. I've seen maybe 3 people make it. All of them were professional snipers with years of experience. What's your point? My point is, there's no shame in backing out. These boys don't know what they're asking. Sarah smiled. Do you have the candle? Murphy grinned. Yeah, I got the candle. Setting up the shot took 30 minutes. Murphy drove Sarah and 2 of the soldiers up to the observation deck in his ATV. The building was a simple structure, basically a concrete bunker with a raised platform for spotting. The flagpole Sarah had mentioned stood at the north corner of the deck, exactly 1,524 meters from the main firing line. Murphy produced a thick white candle from a supply closet. Emergency backup for the generator, he explained. Burns for about 8 hours. He mounted the candle in a metal holder and secured it to a small table on the deck. Then he lit it with a disposable lighter. The flame was steady, bright orange-yellow, about 1 inch tall. Wind? Sarah asked. Murphy checked his handheld weather station. 2 miles per hour from the southeast. Basically nothing. Sarah nodded, studying the target through her own small binoculars. At 1,524 meters, the candle flame was barely visible to the naked eye. Through the binoculars, it looked like a tiny star. The mathematical calculations were running automatically in her head. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, bullet drop. The Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, all factors that would affect a bullet's path over nearly a mile of flight. Back at the firing line, Murphy had set up his best rifle. A custom-built precision instrument based on the Remington 700 platform, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, high-end scope, match-grade ammunition. This is a 12,000 rifle, Murphy told the assembled soldiers. Most accurate weapon I own. If that shot can be made, this is the gun to do it. Jackson and his buddies were setting up smartphones to record the attempt. Word had spread somehow. There were now almost 20 people gathered around the firing line. Other soldiers from the base who'd heard about the bet, a few locals who'd been at the bar, even the sheriff, a guy named Williams, who'd heard the commotion and driven out to see what was happening. Sarah ignored the crowd. She was going through her pre-shot routine, the same mental checklist she'd used in Delta Force. Breathing steady, heart rate controlled, muscle tension minimized. She lay prone behind the rifle, adjusted the bipod legs, settled the stock into her shoulder. The scope was a high-end night force with variable magnification. She dialed it to maximum power and peered downrange. There. A tiny, flickering light in the darkness. Range is 524 meters, Murphy announced to the crowd. Target is a candle flame approximately 1 inch in height and half an inch in width. Murmurs from the spectators. Current conditions: temperature 47 degrees, humidity 62%, barometric pressure 30.15 inches, wind 2 miles per hour from the southeast. Sarah made micro-adjustments to the scope's elevation and windage turrets. She'd fired this exact rifle twice before, during previous visits to Murphy's range. She knew its characteristics, its tendencies. "Shooter ready?" Murphy asked. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was cycling through her breathing, slowing her heart rate, entering the zone that Delta Force instructors called the quiet place, the mental state where everything except the target disappeared. Time seemed to slow down. Her breathing became mechanical. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Her finger found the trigger. A precision instrument with a 2.5-pound pull, breaking clean as glass. The crosshairs settled on the tiny flame. Sarah could feel 20 pairs of eyes watching her. She could hear someone whispering, "No way she makes this shot." She couldn't hear Jackson, but she could imagine him smiling, already counting his $1,000. None of it mattered. In the quiet place, there was only the target. Sarah's finger took up the trigger slack. 1/2 pound of pressure, 1 pound, 2 pounds. The rifle fired. The .338 Lapua Magnum cartridge generated nearly 5,000 foot-pounds of energy as it left the 26-inch barrel. The 250-grain match bullet screamed downrange at 2,900 feet per second, spinning at 180,000 RPM from the rifle's twisted rifling. For 1.7 seconds, the bullet flew through the crisp mountain air. It dropped nearly 40 feet due to gravity. It drifted 3 inches left due to wind. It moved 2 inches right due to the Coriolis effect. At 1,524 meters, traveling at 147 feet per second, the bullet passed exactly through the space occupied by the candle flame. The candle went out. Complete silence for 5 full seconds. Then, chaos. Holy shit! Did she just... The candle's out. No fucking way! Murphy was already on his radio, calling up to the observation deck. Confirmed target status. The voice crackled back. Candle is extinguished. Direct hit on the flame. The crowd erupted. Soldiers were shouting, slapping each other on the back, pulling out phones to call friends who weren't there. Sarah remained prone behind the rifle, eyes still to the scope, watching the thin line of smoke rising from the extinguished candle. She'd known she would make the shot. She'd made harder shots in much worse conditions. But watching Jackson's face as the reality sank in, that was worth the price of admission. He looked like a man who'd just watched someone violate the laws of physics. "That's impossible," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nobody makes that shot." Sarah finally lifted her head from the scope. She engaged the rifle's safety, checked that the chamber was empty, and stood up. "You owe me $1,000, she said calmly. Jackson stared at her. "Who the hell are you?" Before Sarah could answer, Murphy was beside her, wearing a huge grin. "Gentlemen," he announced to the crowd, "you just witnessed one of the finest shots I've ever seen on this range." He turned to Sarah. "Mind if I ask where you learned to shoot like that?" Sarah looked around at the circle of faces. Young soldiers who'd gone from confident to confused to awestruck in the span of 10 minutes. She could tell them the truth. She could explain about Delta Force, about Syria, about the 127 confirmed kills. She could watch their expressions change from awe to something else entirely. Or she could let them keep wondering. "My father taught me," she said simply, which was true in a way. Master Sergeant Robert Chen had taught his daughter to shoot when she was 8 years old. He'd also taught her that the most dangerous opponents were the ones nobody saw coming. Jackson was still staring. "Your father taught you to make a 500-meter shot on a candle flame?" "My father taught me a lot of things." The sheriff pushed through the crowd. "Sarah, I've lived in Cedar Falls for 30 years. I had no idea you could shoot like that." "You never asked." More laughter from the crowd, but it was different now. Respectful, impressed. "Seriously," Jackson said, "what's your background? Military? Law enforcement?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "I arrange flowers," she said finally. The drive back to Cedar Falls was surreal. Word had already spread. Sarah's phone was buzzing with text messages from people who'd heard about the shot. The convoy of vehicles now included twice as many cars as it had on the way out. At the Ranger's Rest, a crowd was waiting. "Is it true?" someone called out as Sarah parked her truck. "Did you really hit a candle from a mile away?" 1524 meters, Sarah corrected automatically. The bar was packed now. Word had traveled through Fort Carson via text message and social media. Off-duty soldiers were driving up from the base. Locals were abandoning dinner plans to see the flower shop owner who'd apparently violated physics. Jackson, to his credit, had already been to the ATM. He handed Sarah 10 crisp $100 bills without being asked. "I've never seen anything like that," he said. "In training, on the range, nowhere. That was—" He shook his head. "That was professional level." Sarah folded the money and put it in her jacket pocket. "Thank you. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Have you ever been in the military?" The question Sarah had been dreading. She looked around the bar, dozens of faces watching her, waiting for an answer. "Yes," she said simply. "What branch?" "Army." "What unit?" This was the moment of truth. Sarah could deflect, change the subject, make some excuse about classified information, or she could own who she'd been. "Special operations," she said. The room went quieter. "How special?" Jackson asked. Sarah met his eyes. "As special as it gets." Understanding dawned on Jackson's face. "Delta Force?" Sarah nodded once. The room exploded. "No way." "Delta Force? Are you serious? A woman in Delta Force?" The questions came rapid fire, but Sarah held up a hand for silence. "I served 8 years," she said when the room quieted. 2015 to 2023. I was medically retired after my final deployment. "What was your specialty?" This from Murphy, who'd followed them back to town. "Precision marksman. Sniper," Jackson said. It wasn't a question. "Among other things." The sheriff was studying her with new eyes. "How many of us knew about this?" "Nobody," Sarah said. "I came here to start over, to do something quiet and peaceful." "Why flowers?" someone called out. Sarah smiled. "Because they're beautiful, because they make people happy, because they're the opposite of everything I used to do." The crowd was quiet now, processing this information. "How many?" Jackson started, then stopped. "How many what?" "How many confirmed kills?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah looked around the room. These were good people. Soldiers who served their country, locals who worked hard and cared about their community. They deserved an honest answer. "Enough," she said finally. Jackson nodded slowly. "That shot tonight. For you, that was easy," Sarah said. "Compared to combat conditions, that was easy." As the evening wore on, the crowd thinned out, but a core group remained. Jackson and 3 of his buddies, Murphy, the sheriff, a few locals who'd become regulars at these impromptu gatherings. Someone had bought Sarah a beer. She wasn't much of a drinker, but tonight felt like an exception. "Can I ask about your last deployment?" Jackson said carefully. "I mean, if you're okay talking about it." Sarah studied her beer bottle. "Syria, 2023, counterterrorism operations. That's where you got injured?" "That's where 3 of my teammates got killed." The room went silent. "We were providing overwatch for a hostage rescue," Sarah continued. "Intelligence said the building was lightly defended. Intelligence was wrong." She took a sip of beer. "My team leader was Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, best soldier I ever served with. The medic was Corporal Angela Williams, 24 years old, had a baby daughter back home." Another sip. "The communications specialist was Private First Class David Kim. Kid was a genius with electronics, could hack into anything." Sarah set down the beer bottle. "We were on a rooftop about 800 meters from the target building. I was providing cover while they coordinated with the assault team. Everything was going according to plan." She paused. Then the building next to us exploded. Jackson was leaning forward, listening intently. "RPG from a building we hadn't cleared. Mike was killed instantly. Angela died before the medevac arrived. David," Sarah's voice caught slightly. "David lasted 3 days in the hospital in Germany." The room was completely quiet. "I took shrapnel in my left shoulder and a concussion from the blast, but I was conscious enough to call in the airstrike that took out the RPG team." "How many?" Murphy asked quietly. 7 confirmed kills in about 40 seconds. That brought my total to 127. Sarah picked up her beer again. "The mission was successful. We rescued all 6 hostages, but it cost us everything." "Is that why you left?" the sheriff asked. "Medical retirement. The shoulder damage was too severe for active duty, plus the PTSD." Sarah shrugged. The Army was done with me, and I was done with the Army. So you came here. I came here, bought a flower shop, started arranging roses instead of taking lives. Jackson was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming. For thinking that because you're a woman, because you run a flower shop, you couldn't. He gestured helplessly. I was an idiot. You were young, Sarah said. Young soldiers think they know what a warrior looks like. It takes experience to learn that warriors come in all shapes and sizes. Have you ever regretted it? Someone asked. Leaving the military? Sarah considered the question. Some days. When I read about what's happening overseas, when I hear about soldiers getting killed because they didn't have proper overwatch. She shrugged. Some days I think I should still be out there. But then I help Mrs. Henderson pick out flowers for her husband's grave, or I see a young couple planning their wedding, or I watch kids picking out bouquets for their mothers. Sarah smiled. And I remember that there are different ways to serve. Word of Sarah's background spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. By the next morning, her flower shop had a line of customers stretching around the block. Not all of them were buying flowers. Most just wanted to meet the woman who'd made the impossible shot, who'd served in Delta Force, who'd been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. Sarah handled the attention with the same calm professionalism she'd brought to military operations. She answered questions when appropriate, deflected when necessary, and never stopped being gracious to her customers. The mayor, a man named Peterson, stopped by around noon. Sarah, I had no idea about your background, he said. If we'd known we had a decorated veteran in town, you'd have done what differently? Peterson looked embarrassed. Well, we could have honored your service. Maybe a parade or a ceremony or... Mayor Peterson, Sarah said gently. I came here specifically to avoid that kind of attention. I wanted to be normal, to be just another small business owner. But your service? My job. Running this shop, being part of this community, that's my life. Peterson nodded slowly. I understand. But if there's ever anything the town can do... Actually, there is something. Name it, Sarah smiled. There are a lot of veterans in this area. Some of them are struggling with the transition to civilian life. If the town could organize some kind of support group, a place for them to connect, consider it done. 2 weeks later, the first meeting of the Cedar Falls Veterans Support Group took place in the community center. 12 people showed up. Age range from 24 to 67, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, combat veterans and support personnel, men and women who'd served everywhere from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Sarah had volunteered to facilitate the first meeting. I'm not a counselor, she told the group. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who's been where you've been and found a way forward. The meeting was awkward at first. Veterans weren't typically comfortable sharing feelings with strangers. But gradually, people began to open up. There was Mike Thompson, a Marine veteran who'd lost his leg in Iraq and was struggling with depression. Linda Rodriguez, an Air Force veteran who couldn't sleep because of nightmares from her deployment to Afghanistan. James Wilson, a Navy veteran who'd been homeless for 6 months before finding work at the local garage. The hardest part, Linda said during that first meeting, is feeling invisible, like the person I was in the military doesn't matter anymore. Nods around the circle. I was a sergeant, Mike said. People looked up to me, depended on me. Now I'm just the guy with the fake leg who works at the hardware store. Your service mattered, Sarah said firmly. Your sacrifice mattered. The fact that you're struggling now doesn't diminish what you did over there. Easy for you to say, Mike replied, a slight edge in his voice. You're the famous Delta Force sniper. People respect you. Sarah smiled sadly. Mike, 3 weeks ago, nobody in this town knew I'd ever been in the military. They saw me as the quiet lady who sold flowers. I felt just as invisible as you do. What changed? I stopped hiding. I let people see who I really was. And they accepted you. Some did, some didn't. But I realized that I was never going to heal completely if I kept pretending my military service didn't happen. The group met every Tuesday evening. Word spread and attendance grew. By the end of the month, they had 18 regular members. The community center donated the space permanently. Local businesses started offering job opportunities specifically for veterans. Jackson, the young soldier who'd lost the bet, became a regular attendee. He was transitioning out of the Army and struggling with what came next. I keep thinking about that night at the range, he told the group one evening. Not just the shot, but what happened after. how I'd completely misjudged someone based on my assumptions. We all make assumptions, Sarah said. The trick is being willing to change them when we get new information. How do you do it? Jackson asked. How do you go from being Delta Force to arranging flowers without losing yourself? Sarah thought about the question. I don't think I've lost myself, she said finally. I think I've found a different version of myself. The skills are the same: precision, focus, attention to detail. I just use them for different purposes now. Do you miss it? The military? I miss my teammates. I miss the sense of purpose, but I don't miss the killing. How do you live with it? The things you had to do? This was the question Sarah had been expecting, the one she asked herself every morning when she looked in the mirror. I remember why I did them, she said. Every person I killed was trying to kill innocent people. Every shot I took saved lives. That doesn't make it easy, but it makes it bearable. 6 months after the night at Murphy's Range, Sarah received a phone call that changed everything. Staff Sergeant Chen, the voice was formal, military. This is Sarah Mitchell. Ma'am, this is Colonel Martinez from JSOC. I'm calling because we have a situation that requires your particular skill set. Sarah's blood went cold. Sir, I'm medically retired. Yes, ma'am, I'm aware of your status. This isn't about active duty. This is about a consulting contract. I'm not interested. Ma'am, with respect, you might want to hear the details. Against her better judgment, Sarah listened. There was a situation in Eastern Europe. American hostages held by a terrorist group in a remote compound. The rescue mission required precision elimination of sentries at distances exceeding about 200 meters. The military's current snipers were excellent, but this particular shot required someone with Sarah's specific experience and skill level. How many hostages? Sarah asked. 14, 12 adults, 2 children. Sarah closed her eyes. Children? Yes, ma'am, ages 6 and 8. The silence stretched for almost a minute. I need time to think about it, Sarah said finally. Ma'am, we need an answer in 24 hours. After she hung up, Sarah sat in her flower shop, surrounded by roses and lilies and baby's breath, trying to figure out what to do. She called the only person she trusted to help her think it through. Murphy's Range. Murphy, it's Sarah. Can you meet me at the shop? 20 minutes later, Murphy was sitting across from her at the small table where she usually worked on arrangements. The government wants me back, Sarah said without preamble. Murphy raised an eyebrows. Back how? Sarah explained the situation. The hostages, the impossible shot, the children. What are you thinking? Murphy asked when she finished. I'm thinking I came here to get away from that life. And? And there are 2 kids who might die if I don't help. Murphy nodded slowly. What would your teammates say, the ones who didn't make it back? Sarah didn't have to think about the answer. They'd say those kids are more important than my peace of mind. Sounds like you already know what you're doing. I know what I should do. I'm not sure if I can do it. Murphy leaned back in his chair. Sarah, I've seen a lot of shooters in my time. Competition marksmen, military snipers, law enforcement specialists. That shot you made 6 months ago? That wasn't just skill. That was something else entirely. What do you mean? I mean, you're not just good at this, you're gifted. And sometimes gifts come with responsibilities. Sarah stared out the window at Main Street. A normal Tuesday afternoon in Cedar Falls. Mrs. Henderson walking to the post office. Tom Rodriguez washing his truck. Kids riding bikes home from school. If I do this, she said, if I go back, even temporarily, you're worried you won't be able to come back here, to this life. Something like that. Murphy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my son was a Marine, did 2 tours in Afghanistan. When he came home, he told me something I never forgot. What? He said the hardest part wasn't learning to kill. It was learning when to stop. Sarah looked at him. Maybe, Murphy continued, the question isn't whether you can go back. Maybe the question is whether you can live with yourself, if you don't. That evening, Sarah called an emergency meeting of the Veteran Support Group. 18 people gathered in the community center, sensing from Sarah's tone that something important was happening. I need advice, Sarah said without preamble, and I need it from people who understand what it means to serve. She explained the situation, the hostages, the children, the impossible shot that only she could make. When she finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Mike Thompson spoke up. Are you asking for our permission? I'm asking for your perspective. Linda Rodriguez leaned forward. Sarah, you've spent 6 months helping us figure out how to live with what we've done. Maybe this is about figuring out how to live with what you don't do. Meaning. Meaning if those kids die because you weren't there to save them, how are you going to feel? James Wilson, the former Navy veteran, raised his hand. Can I ask something? Sarah nodded. If you do this mission, does that mean you're going back permanently? No, this would be a one-time consulting contract. 72 hours maximum. Then what's the real issue? Sarah took a deep breath. The real issue is that I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if I pick up a rifle again, I won't be able to put it down. I'm afraid that I'll remember how good I was at killing people, and this peaceful life I've built will disappear. Jackson, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Sarah, can I tell you what I learned from you? What? I learned that being a warrior isn't about what weapons you carry. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice to protect people who can't protect themselves. He gestured around the room. Look at what you've done here. You've created a safe space for veterans. You've helped people heal. You've shown a whole town that heroes come in unexpected packages. He paused. That's warrior stuff too. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. If you go on this mission, Jackson continued, you won't be going as someone who's given up the warrior life. You'll be going as someone who's found a different way to serve. The vote was unanimous. Every person in the room agreed that Sarah should take the mission, but the final decision was still hers to make. Sarah called Colonel Martinez at 800 the next morning. This is Sarah Mitchell. I'll take the contract. Outstanding. We'll have a plane waiting for you at Denver International at 1400 hours. I have conditions. Name them. First, I choose my own equipment. I'll need access to a rifle I've trained with. Done. Second, I'm there as a consultant only. I take the shot, then I come home. Understood. Third, if this goes public, if my involvement gets revealed, I walk away and you handle the fallout. Agreed. Sarah hung up and looked around her flower shop. Roses and lilies and baby's breath. The life she'd built. The peace she'd found. She walked to the back room and opened a storage closet. Behind boxes of vases and floral supplies was a locked gun case she hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside was her personal rifle, the weapon she'd carried through 8 years of special operations, a custom-built precision instrument that she knew better than her own heartbeat. She also kept her medals in the case: Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, commendation medals from operations that officially never happened, and a photo of her team: Mike Rodriguez, Angela Williams, David Kim, the 3 people who died because someone had to stay behind to provide cover fire. This is for you guys, she said quietly. 36 hours later, Sarah was lying prone on a mountain ridge in Eastern Europe, 1,847 meters from a terrorist compound where 14 American hostages were being held. The mission briefing had been simple. 2 sentries on the compound's main tower. Both had to be eliminated simultaneously to prevent either from raising an alarm. The assault team would move in 30 seconds after the shots. Sarah's spotter was a young Marine gunnery sergeant named Rodriguez, no relation to her deceased teammate, but the name still hit her hard. Wind is steady at 4 miles per hour from the northwest, Rodriguez whispered. Temperature is 38 degrees, humidity at 71%. Sarah made micro-adjustments to her scope. The rifle felt like an extension of her body, familiar and comfortable despite 3 years of disuse. Through the scope, she could see both targets clearly. 2 men with AK-47s patrolling the tower according to a predictable pattern. Range to target 1 is 1,847 meters, Rodriguez reported. Range to target 2 is 1,851 meters. Sarah controlled her breathing. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. The crosshairs settled on the first target. Assault team is in position, came the voice through her earpiece. Standing by for your signal. Sarah's finger found the trigger, the same glass-clean break she'd known for years. Target 1 acquired, she whispered. The man in her scope was young, maybe 25. He had a photo tucked into his body armor, probably his family. Sarah pushed the thought away. This man was holding children hostage. Whatever his reasons, whatever his story, he'd made his choice. Target 2 acquired, Rodriguez confirmed. He was tracking the second sentry through his own scope. On my count, Sarah whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. Sarah fired. 1.9 seconds later, the bullet struck target 1 center mass. Simultaneously, Rodriguez fired his own rifle, eliminating target 2. Both sentries dropped without a sound. "Targets neutralized," Sarah reported. "Assault team, you are clear to move." Through her scope, she watched as the assault team breached the compound. 12 minutes later, all 14 hostages were secure. Mission accomplished. Sarah lay behind the rifle for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. She'd taken a life again. After 3 years of arranging flowers, of building a peaceful existence, she'd killed someone. But 14 people were going home to their families because of that shot, including 2 children who would grow up because Sarah Mitchell had been willing to pick up a rifle one more time. Sarah was back in Cedar Falls 36 hours later. She walked into her flower shop at 7 a.m., just like always, flipped the sign from closed to open, began arranging the day's displays. Mrs. Henderson came in at 9 a.m. for her weekly tulips. "Sarah, dear, you look tired. Are you feeling all right?" "Just a little travel fatigue, Mrs. Henderson. I had to visit family out of state." Which was true, in a way. The military had been her family for 8 years. By noon, word had somehow leaked that Sarah had been out of town on government business. The rumors ranged from FBI consultation to CIA recruitment to alien abduction. Sarah deflected them all with the same calm professionalism she'd always shown. But that evening, at the Veteran Support Group meeting, she told the truth. "I went back," she said simply. "One last mission." The group was quiet, waiting. 14 hostages, 2 of them children. The shot had to be perfect. "And?" Jackson asked. "It was." Mike Thompson leaned forward. "How do you feel?" Sarah considered the question. "Sad," she said finally. "Sad that it was necessary. Sad that someone had to die, but not guilty. Because you saved lives. Because I remembered what I'm really good at. And why that matters." Linda Rodriguez spoke up. "So what now? Are you back in the game?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm exactly where I belong. In this room with all of you. In this town, arranging flowers and helping people heal." "But if they call again?" Sarah smiled. "If there are children who need saving, and I'm the only one who can make the shot?" She shrugged. "Then I guess I'll go." Jackson nodded slowly. "Warrior for life." "Warrior for life," Sarah agreed. "Just fighting different battles now." A year later, Cedar Falls hosted its first annual Veterans Appreciation Day. The event was Sarah's idea, but the whole town had embraced it. A parade down Main Street, a barbecue in the park, speeches from local veterans, recognition for service members past and present. Sarah had been asked to be the keynote speaker. She stood at the podium in the park, looking out at hundreds of faces, veterans and their families, active duty soldiers from Fort Carson, local residents who'd come to show their support. In the front row sat the members of the Veteran Support Group, which had grown to 37 regular attendees. "A year and a half ago," Sarah began, "I made a bet with a young soldier. He thought he knew what a warrior looked like. He was wrong." Laughter from the crowd. "He thought warriors were young, male, and obvious. He thought they carried their strength on their sleeves and their credentials in their wallets." She paused. "But the truth is, warriors come in all shapes and sizes. They're the nurse who holds your hand in the emergency room and who served 2 tours as a combat medic. They're the teacher who helps your child learn to read and who once defused IEDs in Afghanistan. They're the mechanic who fixes your car and who flew helicopters over Iraq." Nods throughout the crowd. "Warriors are all around us, every day. Most of them don't advertise their service. They don't wear uniforms anymore. They've traded their rifles for stethoscopes, their radios for lesson plans, their tactical gear for business suits." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "But they're still warriors. They're still serving. They're just fighting different battles now." She looked directly at the Veteran Support Group. "They're fighting the battle against isolation, helping other veterans connect and heal. They're fighting the battle against ignorance, showing their communities what real service looks like. They're fighting the battle against despair, proving that there's life and purpose and meaning after the uniform comes off." Sarah smiled. "So when you see the quiet person at the grocery store, the friendly face at the bank, the helpful neighbor next door, remember that you might be looking at a hero, someone who risked everything for this country and is now building something beautiful in return." She gestured toward her flower shop, visible from the park. "Warriors don't stop being warriors when they leave the battlefield. They just find new ways to serve." The applause was thunderous. After the speeches, as the crowd mingled and enjoyed the barbecue, Jackson approached Sarah. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you." "Can I ask you something?" Sarah nodded. "Do you ever regret that night at Murphy's Range? The bet, the shot, all the attention that followed?" Sarah looked around the park. Veterans laughing with their families, children playing on the playground, community members thanking service members for their sacrifice. She thought about the support group that had saved Mike Thompson from suicide, the job placement program that had helped Linda Rodriguez start her own business, the scholarship fund that was sending James Wilson's daughter to college. She thought about the phone call that might come someday, asking her to make another impossible shot to save another child's life. She thought about the flowers she'd arrange tomorrow morning, the simple beauty she'd create to brighten someone's day. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. That night, I stopped hiding who I was. And it turns out, hiding wasn't protecting anyone, including me." Jackson smiled. "Warrior for life." "Warrior for life," Sarah agreed, "just with better flowers." 2 years later, Petals and Peace remained the most popular flower shop in Cedar Falls. The walls were now decorated with photos from Veterans Appreciation Day, letters from grateful customers, and a framed certificate from the mayor proclaiming Sarah Citizen of the Year. On the counter, in a place of honor, sat a small plaque that read, "Some people create beauty. Some people defend freedom. The rarest people do both." Sarah still woke up at 3 a.m. sometimes, still calculated wind speed by watching flower petals, still positioned herself to see all exits when entering a room. But now she also taught shooting classes at Murphy's Range. She consulted with law enforcement on long-range situations. She mentored young veterans transitioning to civilian life. And twice more, she'd received phone calls asking her to make impossible shots to save innocent lives. Both times she'd said yes. Both times she'd come home to her flowers. The young soldiers at Fort Carson all knew about the florist who'd been Delta Force. Some came to visit the shop, hoping to meet the woman who'd made the legendary shot. Sarah was always gracious, always humble, always quick to redirect attention to other veterans in the community. But sometimes, when a particularly arrogant young soldier suggested that women couldn't handle combat, Sarah would smile and ask if they'd like to make a small wager. Nobody took the bet anymore. Word had gotten around. And in a small mountain town in Colorado, a quiet woman continued to arrange flowers with the same precision she'd once used to save lives, secure in the knowledge that warriors never really retire. They just find new battles to fight. Have you ever met someone who seemed ordinary but turned out to be extraordinary? Someone whose quiet strength and hidden skills reminded you that heroes walk among us every day? Share their story in the comments. Tell us about the veterans, the first responders, the everyday heroes in your community who deserve recognition. Because at Hidden Heroes, we believe that the most powerful stories aren't always the loudest ones. Sometimes they're whispered by florists who once saved lives from impossible distances. Subscribe if this story moved you. Share it if you know someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the next time you meet someone quiet and unassuming, you might be standing next to a legend. Till next time, keep looking for the heroes hiding in plain sight.